Hello, everyone. Today, we'll be discussing the ethical guidelines that have to be kept in mind by researchers when they're conducting researches on animals. Now, this study that is a part of our A-level psychology syllabus that was conducted by Fagen et al. In the year 2014 is about elephant learning. This study is about the usage of SPR training techniques, that is secondary positive training, secondary positive reinforcement techniques to be able to collect a sample to test elephants for tuberculosis. The study was conducted in Nepal. Now, there are certain ethical guidelines that are there that are expected by the researchers to be kept in mind while conducting researches on animals, right? So, taking this ahead, if we have a look at the ethical guidelines in general that are to be followed, that are expected by researchers to be followed. To begin with, number one, we speak about replacement. What does the word replacement over here mean? Now, while conducting researches on animals, it is expected from researchers to try to choose a replacement technique or an alternative technique to be able to collect data, right? This could be done by collecting data from previous researches that have been conducted on the same subject matter, or you could even use computer simulations. Number two, we speak about species, the second element or the second point that has to be kept in mind while conducting researches on animals. When you refer to species, it is expected by the researchers to choose a species that is the least likely to suffer pain or distress, right? Now, other relevant factors include whether the animals were bred in captivity. Now, this is a specific point that does fall into place when you talk about the study that was conducted by Fagen et al. They did not, what do you call it, use animals. They did not pick up animals from the wild. So they just conducted a research on animals, on elephants that were already in captivity. So other relevant factors include whether the animals were bred in captivity, their previous experience of experimentation, and their sentience of the species, that is, their ability to think and feel. Taking this ahead, the third point. So, yeah, the sum up of the second point is be very careful. Be very careful when you're choosing the specific animal that you want to conduct your research on, the species you're choosing. You make a point that you're picking up a species that is the least to be affected through pain or distress. That also you keep in mind several factors such as them being captive or them being picked up from wild, their previous experiences, their sentience levels, etc. Number three, the animals that you're using should be the least. Just because they're animals, that doesn't at all mean you get hold of loads of them. Because you're a human, they're an animal, and you're powerful enough to be able to conduct a research on them. Don't do that. If you're conducting a research on animals, try to reduce the number of animals that you want to use for your research. So the third point, the number of animals. Only the minimum number of animals needed to produce valid and reliable results should be used. To minimize the numbers, the researchers could conduct pilot studies. Pilot studies are smaller scale studies that are conducted before the actual study to test for the feasibility of the research, right? Any small scale study conducted before the actual study to test for the feasibility of the research is referred to as a pilot study. So you might as well conduct your research prior to you conducting your actual research. The researchers are advised to conduct pilot studies too. So yeah, minimize the number of animals, conduct pilot studies that help you gather reliable measures of the dependent variable. Good experimental design should be used, and appropriate data analysis should also be used. So the third point that has to be kept in mind over here is the number of animals that are used for collection of data, for data collection, should be minimized. The fewer the better. The next one, procedure. Research on animals is controlled by legal requirements and or guidelines from relevant organizations as well. So there are certain relevant organizations that ensure that animals are not put to harm, and researchers, while conducting researches, are expected to abide by, or they're expected to adhere to those rules and regulations and cater to all the legal requirements as well. So research on animals is controlled by legal requirements and or guidelines from relevant organizations because studies will necessarily affect the animal in some way. However, for research on animals to be effective, the animal's experience should, as far as possible within the constraints of the research being conducted, be a normal and a positive one. So while we'd be specifically talking about the limitations of the ethical guidelines or the extent to which these ethical guidelines for animals were followed by Fagen et al. That this point that we discussed here, the constraints of research being conducted, they're always there. But you as a researcher, you should try to the best of your capacity to make the experience of these elephants or any other animal and a good one, a positive one, right? Remember, there was SPR training technique used over here, secondary positive reinforcement, right? There was no aversion over here whatsoever. There are therefore guidelines to help psychologists to take care of their research animals as well. The next one, pain, suffering, and distress. Research causing death or suffering, such as disease, pain, injury, physiological or psychological distress, and discomfort, should be avoided. Where possible, designs which improve rather than worsen the animal's experience should be used. Did this happen in this research? Oh, yes, it did. So, alternatively, naturally occurring instances may be used, example, where stress arises naturally in the animal's environment or lifetime. During research, attention should be paid to the animal's daily care and their veterinary needs, and any cost to the animals should be justified by the scientific benefits of the work. So we understand you conducting a research, the research is typically or usually conducted by researchers, are conducted with a good intention. That being there, but the findings of the research or the scientific gain out of the research should be a lot more than the amount of discomfort that you're causing to that animal. The next one over here has to do with isolation, the next ethical guideline. Isolation and crowding can cause animal distress. Caging conditions should be dependent on the social behavior of the species. The level of stress experienced by individuals should also be considered, the animal's age and gender. Between testing, animals should be housed with enough space to move freely and with sufficient food and water for their health and well-being, both in terms of the biological or ecological needs. However, the artificial environment only needs to recreate the aspects of natural environment that are important to the welfare and survival of the animal, provide them with warmth, space for exercise, or somewhere to hide. Now, we just discussed a few ethical guidelines, and the first one over here was replacement of animals with with computer simulations. Maybe number two, being mindful about the species that you're choosing. Number three, the number of animals that you're choosing to collect your data from should be minimized. Number four, the procedure that you're using should be in line with the legal requirements that cater to the welfare of elephants and animals in general. There should be no pain, suffering, and distress. Number six, housing conditions should be catered to. Number seven, reward deprivation and aversive stimuli. So use rewards whenever use rewards to appreciate or to encourage a particular behavior, right? Do not use do not keep the animals deprived from anything, for instance from food, from warmth, from shelter. Don't do that, right? Do not use aversive stimuli. Do not make them go through pain or any sort of suffering. So reward deprivation and aversive stimuli. Deprivation is the removal of resources that are important to an animal. In planning studies using deprivation, the normal feeding or drinking patterns of the animals should be considered so that their needs can be satisfied. The use of preferred food should be considered as an alternative to deprivation. Example for rewards in learning studies. Remember, these elephants, they were given sliced food, bananas. So, and alternatives to unpleasant stimuli and deprivation should be used wherever possible. Now, these were a few strengths and weaknesses that are. I'm sorry, I've been using the word strengths and weaknesses. So these were a few ethical guidelines that are to be kept in mind by researchers, especially when they're conducting researches on animals. Now, let's hop on to the ethical guidelines that have been relevant to the study that was conducted by Fagen et al. In 2014 in Nepal, where, and this has to do with elephant learning through SPR technique. Now, when involving animals in studies, it is important to think about ethical guidelines. We just spoke about them. In this case, the elephants were treated well. Number one, let me choose another color. So the elephants were treated well during the research. There was no sign of them being harmed. They had plenty of time to graze. Remember, 2 sessions. Number four, they were properly fed. Number five, they could socialize with other elephants in the natural surroundings. To be more ethical, the study focused on training captive elephants. So, training captive elephants, they conducted a research on animals that were already in captivity instead of going and picking up other elephants from the wild. Number seven, they used positive reinforcement techniques. So these were all the good things that these could all be the points that could give Fagan all a +2 for conducting the research in an ethical manner. So the main aim of the research was to find a way to collect useful trunk wash sample. This would help in managing captive elephants and quickly diagnosing and treating tuberculosis, benefiting the elephants. Importantly, the researchers avoided using punishment and instead used a training method that didn't harm the animals. So this has to be kept in mind here. The husbandry conditions were not altered for this study. Another important point that is again an advantage. So the elephants were able to graze in the jungle with their mayhows from 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. and then from 10:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. That's quite a lot of time. And this point is linked to this. Here you go, right? Number two, for the remainder of the day and during the night, for the remainder of the day and during the night, each elephant was leg chained to posts in an open stall. Now, the researchers did not specifically do this for this research. This was the general routine that these elephants had with or without the research being conducted. They were usually placed on we're talking about the chain over here. They were usually placed on both legs. The chain was between 6 to 8 feet long and was slack enough to allow easy movement around the stall or the post. So the animals, these elephants, they had around 6 to 8 feet of diameter through which they could move about and around while they were being chained. Next one, the elephant's diet was mainly fresh grass and dana. Dana is a better word. So, dana, a mixture of grain, nutritional supplements, and grass. So, us Pakistanis, we know what the word dana over here refers to. The next one, the elephants had access to water, but only when they were grazing. And there was a reason behind this. That was because the researchers did not want them to be sorry, the elephants having access to water while testing could have affected the results. So they did have enough of ample of access to water, but this was typically when they did go out for grazing during this time. So yeah. Now the next one, yeah, this is a summary of the study. This might as well be helpful for you. This doesn't have much of information, so I just wrap it up here as well. The research method used was an observation. We might as well refer to this as a structured observation because there was a behavioral checklist, and you might as well refer to this as a controlled observation. So the technique that was used over here was a secondary positive reinforcement technique. And how many elephants were there? The sample comprised of 5 female elephants. Sampling technique was an opportunity sample. Experimental design, IVDV, does not apply over here because this was very clearly not an experiment. Quantitative data was collected over here. The sessions being timed, the number of offers, the number of training sessions needed successfully to complete the task, and the number of test passes, and qualitative data. So, my dear, I was trying to help you all understand the ethical guidelines in for animals in general and the ethical guidelines that are applicable for the study that was conducted by Fagen et al. In the year 2014, which was about elephant learning. I hope this has been helpful. Take good care of yourselves. Stay happy, healthy, safe, and protected. Stay humble. Spread positivity, spread smiles, and Allah Hafiz.